as a coach, I guess what I'm hearing there is you're almost honing in or listening out for that wisdom in the other person.
Absolutely.
And when you hear it, you're almost like holding up a mirror and saying, "Look."
That's right.
Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly
here?
right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right, Liz.
So look, I know people. In my head, I'm thinking, I know a lot of coaches who have done acres of research and academic stuff, and are full of the theories that underpin coaching as it is today. And I can almost hear their resistance to what I find quite exciting, that is so simple, but I'm just kind of thinking, I can imagine that it must be quite threatening for some coaches, this understanding at when they first come across it. Is that something you've experienced?
There are times, yes.
Yeah.
And I felt that myself, again, because of my religious background. I felt that in being introduced to these principles. What eliminated that was insight. Now, I'd love to say, once I had that first insight that showed me there was another level of understanding from the inside out that I'd been totally unfamiliar with, I'd love to say that from then on, I never ever experienced that. But that's just not true, and that's not life. We live in this world of form, and we have this formless energy behind us that allows us as humans to create our reality. And once you get a taste of that, it's like it supports you. Even if you go in and out of it, it continues to support you and keep you moving forward. It's like part of the discussion we had this morning, that the good news, bad news syndrome is that when you've gained some insight and your mental health has increased and you're living in a more positive world, and then you take a dip south and it's not so nice anymore, it feels worse because you've been living in a much healthier state, and so, like, that's the good news, that you've been living in a healthier state. The bad news is that it doesn't feel good. It feels worse when you've gone down. But the good news is that, again, oh my gosh, like I'd never had that degree of well-being before. And so if when I go down it feels worse, that it's less familiar to me, that I'm less comfortable in feeling the stress and the anxiety, that's progress. And the other thing is, it moves you out of it because it feels so unpleasant when you've been used to a more positive feeling. It propels you out of it. Like, why would you stay there? It's like the tape we saw of Sydney Banks this morning where he said, somebody would put their finger in the fire and say it hurts. Well, you wouldn't recommend that person put their finger back in the fire again. That's what it felt like to me. When, for the first time in my life, I was happy for a few weeks, and then I thought, this isn't natural. Like, this isn't natural to me. There must be something, something. And so I searched around in my life and in my environment, and I found something I could be upset about. But it felt so terrible. And then when a dear friend and mentor recommended that I just be grateful that it felt worse than it used to, and to see that in reality was an indication of my mental health, there was such logic to that's why it was feeling worse, because I was healthier. So, you keep looking for evidence. You listen to people, you hear their wisdom, as you say, you hold the mirror up to them, and oftentimes you will see them gain insight that will prompt insight in you as a coach. I've had that many times, and I love that. And so does your client. It levels the playing field, the playing grounds, or whatever you would call them, and it points out that we're not the fixer-upper, that we're operating from the same capacity of wisdom. And it's a beautiful gift to be in service to someone and to hold the mirror up. But in reality, they're the ones that are making progress. You know, they're the ones that are finding the answers and the solutions to their own dilemmas. I remember when I would talk again to my mentor and say to him, like, I've got this problem. Or even when my marriage was crumbling, and this was after we had been learning about the principles, and I was just so overwrought and stressed, and he would never talk to us. My mentor would never talk to me about our problems or to anybody else that he was mentoring. It's like, that's the outside, you know, just go inside and you'll find the answer. Just go inside. And then he'd move on to something else. I was working with him on a book that he was writing, and so he had compassion for where I was, but he didn't entertain what was wrong. And he just immediately moved into writing this book about beautiful truth and these principles. And I found as my attention focused on truth, my problems weren't as prominent in that moment. And then later on that day, when I went back home, they still weren't as prominent until maybe a few days later I'd start to focus on what the problems were. So you start to learn by the evidence in your own life, where you focus your attention is where you're creating your reality. And I learned that I prefer to have and live in a nicer reality, and that I had the power to do that by the way I use thought.